Moving on, our next session, that is a set of two fireside chats. The first one with Mr. Barry Carter, Chief Information Officer at RealPage, followed by a discussion with Mr. Sandeep Dadlani, who is the Chief Digital Officer at Mars Inc. Hosting the chat is Mr. S Viswanathan, Vice President, Industry Initiatives at NASSCOM. KSV, over to you.
Thank you, Vibhu. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What a pleasant the sessions we've been having for the last 1.5 days. You know, the topic on cloud is aspect on business is never impact until you've spoken to a practitioner who has seen it all. He's seen it all. And the topic we're discussing today, cloud, the achieving scale and impact, the story of cloud. How does it take? What does it take to bring it across? To talk about that topic and what we need to do, how to make it successful and scale it up, who else but Barry Carter? Barry Carter, Chief Information Officer at RealPage. He's going to share with us his experiences, his thought processes, and how can an existing company which is wanting to go from on-prem to cloud, and those people are completely new wanting to jump into the cloud, and the experience they can go through, what they need to go through, and what are the pitfalls to avoid for them to be successful. Just as a small intro about Barry. Barry is a Texan, loves good food, loves Italian food to be precise, loves golf, loves beach, and loves travel to India. Loves travel to India. This is what we know is so well about him. And I say in his current role of CIO, he is also overseeing the visionary role of how should technology support a real estate business in 3 to 5 years from now. He's not solving today's problem. That's the beauty of this conversation going to be. Barry, good morning to you.
Hey, great to see everyone. Thanks for having me today.
Barry, just to make this session interactive in the terms of the audience, this is a day 2 of the session. So the day 1 of the session, they've been exposed to several nuances of cloud computing, etc. My first question to you, you may like to elaborate, that you have seen it as an on-prem computing company in your past life, and your present life, you're completely working on a SaaS company. There are several companies, old and young, wanting to take the route of the on-cloud computing services to deliver value to the customer. This world is also moving towards personalization, what we need to do. In this context of personalization, the world of on-cloud computing, what is it you look at? How does it look at things the past, things the present, what is things likely to be the future? If you can give your perspective to the audience, they will immensely benefit from that, Barry.
Yeah, so let's kind of talk about the past first. And so really what was different in the past is that you had to have really strong supply chain partners, really strong infrastructure architects to help connect all the various pieces of hardware to form a cost-effective computing platform that then you could layer your middleware on and then ultimately put your application stack on. So you had to worry about the procurement of the platform. You also had to worry about the lifecycle management of the platform. Okay, and you had to do it at a cost-effective price point. Then if you kind of contrast that to today's world of application building, and as far as you have instant gratification as far as being able, as long as your credit card works, being able to spin up a cloud instance and then take all your application piece parts from a various app store, and then build your application, deploy your application, or you can even configure an application with no code and get it up and going in a very short period of time. So really, if you take a look at the past, lots of planning on the front end and the back end, and then more of kind of an instant gratification culture and the ability to kind of wow people extremely quickly.
Tell me, sometimes in your transaction, you crack what 5 billion transaction, you generate 2 billion reports during a peak time, etc. This obviously calls for scalable architecture. It requires for agile architecture. It requires for enough of capacity to manage it. Obviously, in the current world of cloud computing, your ability to scale up and down is very important. So in your context, in the context of RealPage, how do you manage scale? If I'm a young company wanting to get to the cloud, Should I plan for 80% of my scale capacity or wait for the capacity to exhaust and do? What would you relate to getting the scale? When do I plan for scale? Scale is planned 3 years ahead of schedule or around the schedule, or how is that? What is your experience there?
Well, for RealPage, we are a property management company that generally services apartment owners and operators. So if you kind of take a look at the critical days of the month for us, there are the last 2 days of the month and the first 7 days of the month. And there's a couple of big things that are going on during those days. So we have people paying their rent, known as the rent cycle. And then we also have the property management companies. They're doing their accounting close and their end of month processing. So we kind of get a double whammy, particularly at end of quarter and end of year going on. So what we have to do is, we critically review the data from the previous rent cycle. And then there's a phenomenon known as the day of the week that the first of the month falls on. And if the day of the week that the first of the month falls on is a Monday, we're likely to get about 20% more transaction volume across about 7 of our different critical systems that are playing in either the rent cycle or the accounting close. So our system planners have to make sure that they have plenty of headroom for that 9-day period, and then from there, we generally have excess capacity for the rest of the month. In a cloud-based world, we can pull some of that capacity down and not pay for it on the systems that run the cloud. But for us, we have, we're kind of running in a bimodal world. We have some of our applications on the cloud, and then we have some in our RealPage cloud, which is a very large VM-based private cloud that we're effectively doing the same thing that the cloud providers are doing.
Interesting you said that. Tell me, Barry, in your experience world, have you seen that, customer experience is constantly changing? It's increasing, improving, and asking for the better. Just because it's cloud, because they started tasted initial success of how their queries or demand could be serviced differently online, near time basis. Is the experience profile changing? The experience is increasing, or do they not care? They need that kind of services. You use on-prem, on cloud, doesn't make difference. Just deliver me services. Is it getting augmented with an on-cloud services platform?
Well, really what we've kind of seen as a SaaS provider in the early days, there was kind of skepticism of, would people let you host their application? Could people allow you to hold their data, right? And so the good news is there's been dramatic advances in the security profile of what we're able to do in both public clouds and private clouds that we're able to give people the comfort and assurances that their most critical data is going to be protected, as well as we're giving them an experience that has little to no latency. So,
exactly.
So people have gotten past most of the concerns around SaaS, and really the last thing that's kind of going on is this other thing around the subscription economy and moving from buying software to renting software.
And tell me something, you talk about data. Now, obviously, especially the end of the month, beginning of the month, end of the week, big day of the week, etc., that data is very high, and you're serving multiple countries, multiple geographies, etc. The regulators are playing a very important role also. Today, perhaps you may have an centralized data privacy, data management policies at RealPage. Are you visualizing this will get regulated region-wise, country-wise, perhaps city-wise, perhaps town-wise data? What data could be stored? What data could be accessed? What data could be shared? Are you visualizing those challenges for if I was somebody new wanting to come down to say, and in SaaS-based system or a cloud-based system, I should start worrying about this regulation on data management?
Well, really what we've seen is that there are clearly different issues by region, there's issues by country, and then we have issues by state. We haven't really kind of run into issues yet beyond the state or kind of province level. What we're seeing is, clearly the GDPR and the California equivalent of GDPR, CCPA being kind of some of the critical data regulations. We also have a bit of a, because we process the payments, we're regulated by the state of New York, and the state of New York has one of the only cybersecurity laws in the U.S. and the regulations, and so we have to comply with all of those regulations. And so we have data that is in Asia. We have data that is that's in Europe, and we have data that's in the U.S. And then we have global development centers in various parts of the world, including South America, the Philippines, and India.
The reason I was asking is, with data being critical, with multiple countries evolving equivalent of GDPR or equivalent of CCPA, we are also expecting an Indian equivalent of Data Privacy Act coming in soon. We don't know the contours yet. If it says that the local data needs to be stored in country vis-a-vis in the public cloud, if I am new, should I worry about it, or should I don't worry about it? It'll be taken care of. In new equilibrium will set in some point of time. What is your assessment, Barry?
Well, the good news is, if you're new, you're lucky, because you don't have a whole bunch of legacy data that you have to, go comb through and make sure that you're not in violation of anyone's particular rights, right? So that was really a lot of the challenge for us in the U.S., because we were, one of the first SaaS offerings in the U.S. We had a lot of data that we're no longer in the long haul, based off of some pending legislation, going to be able to retain some of that data. So data retention and the particular type of data that you store is really kind of critical. And if you're new, you clearly need to make sure you're encrypting your databases, because there's more bad guys out there, and they're very sophisticated and very organized, and they would prefer nothing to do but to stick you up and make you find a way to give them Bitcoins.
The reason I was asking, Barry, is that, as I said, the customers are becoming kings and queens, right? So now, end of the day, they do care for privacy of data. End of the day, they want data. So in that context, where we certainly there is and you are one of the largest SaaS-based company in the world, right? So in that context, what additional responsibility is it likely to bring on to you to manage data confidentiality? Have you the additional cloud management policies are required, additional security policies are required, additional SLAs are required? What would those dimensions of those things would be?
Well, really, all of the privacy regulations really require you to protect the data. So you've got to, and then what's the world's best BI tool? Excel, right? So how do you know if something is, if someone took an extract from a database that was encrypted when it was at rest, and they now have private information in a spreadsheet. And so not only do you have to kind of build the protective environment and ensure that you're encrypting the data, you also have to make sure that you know who has access to that data, that they can't get data that they're not supposed to have. And then you've got to have scanning applications that are out there, not only scanning your production environment, but scanning the laptops that people have, right? And then looking to make sure that someone who has a legitimate right to the data hasn't done something unintentional and exposed a derivative view of that data to out that somehow could be internet facing or got put in a Dropbox or one of the other kind of sharing environments. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with taking personally identifying data. And so you also want to make sure that you only collect the amount of data that's absolutely critical.
The reason I was asking, Barry, again, I'm just re-emphasizing important. The audience who's listening to it are perhaps looking at getting into the cloud, or perhaps already in the cloud, scaling across the cloud, learning from you as a lesson. It will evolve a definition of new cloud management policy, isn't it? So,
well, really, you have different tools on the cloud, and you have data. You have localized data, and that's going to drive you to have micro processing centers that where we might have been able to serve all of Europe out of one cloud instance. So as companies offer differing technology, different requirements, you have to be flexible, and you may have to go to an additional cloud provider to be able to satisfy the processing requirements, particularly if the data is required to be in country.
One more thing, Barry, no conversation on cloud is complete without talking about security, especially in the last 18 months, the pandemic time, especially if we look at a country like India, even where you have a fairly large center. You had one center where possibly thousands of people work. Now you have possibly thousands of locations where people are working. And your clients are also geographically distributed, where they are working from home. More the touch points are, more the possibilities of any of the security breach taking place, etc. The people who want to commit security breaches are also getting intelligent, just as the way your network is getting intelligence. So based on your experience of scaling and making impact, obviously security gets a high impact in terms of implementation. What will be the top 3 security parameters that you will think is important for people to consider while implementing a good cloud services for the end customers?
Well, really, for us, the most important thing that any cloud provider can do within their application is provide for multi-factor authentication, because as long as you provide for that multi-factor authentication, it's highly likely that you're going to be able to thwart many of the bad phishing guys out there. So that's kind of one thing to think about. Another big thing to think about is, when everyone was in the office, right, people were working on the corporate network. So now folks are coming into the corporate systems through VPN technology, but they're also out with their kind of internet provider. So there were a lot of things that you could do within your corporate network to police someone's PC that you couldn't do before, and that you couldn't easily do at home. And so the technology is dramatically advanced, and so clearly you want to push your security policies and policing outside of your virtual network down to the laptop or the desktop or whatever device that the individual has. So rethink your network-centric security policy to get to really the end user, and to be able to protect the end user devices, not necessarily from the individual, but from the bad guys that are out there.
Exactly. Tell me, Barry, you said RealPage Cloud. You also run Azure Cloud, right? If I stand corrected. Now,
and we have a fairly large AWS footprint, and we leverage a bunch of Google's proprietary capabilities.
So how do you manage? What keeps you awake? 5 of them, 4 of them. Is interoperability is a problem? Is portability, is it a problem? Does it work seamlessly, smoothly? What is your experience? What would you like to share to the audience? Go ahead. Let's go with.
Yeah. So my experience, has changed over the years. So so now all 3 of the providers have great services. And then also for the Oracle fans out there, we've looked at the Oracle Cloud and on
IBM.
multiple occasions. I do a lot of business with IBM, but we've never done a whole bunch of research on their cloud. But they're a great provider, don't exclude them. And then we also have used some of the other second-tier providers. So my experience, 3 years ago, it was extremely difficult to get the security tooling to effectively mirror how we could secure in the data center. Well, we've really kind of overcome the security issues and can build as robust an environment in the cloud for our customers in the public cloud as we could build in a private cloud. And so we, the technology has dramatically advanced, but don't forget that everything in your security stack, and most companies have about 80 different tools that
Yes.
they've bought with overlapping capabilities. Make sure that you review your security architecture and that you've got full coverage for the cloud environment across, really there's about 23 different capabilities that you need to provide for in a security reference architecture on the cloud. So my big advice is invest in, with some specialty security folks to ensure that you've really got a good security reference architecture. And then also remember, train your people, right? So that's one thing that I've gotten from our Chief Information Security Officer is you're only as good as your weakest link. And if you have someone that gets phished and gives up their credentials, and then someone comes in and the multi-factor authentication comes in and they give up their credentials, well, all that great defense that you built and invested in, which is, for us, millions of dollars, has just all gone for nothing. So, educate the people, build a security culture, and your enterprise can thrive.
So Barry, I have a last question to you. I guess this is also equally interesting to you as you have answered all these things so passionately. So what you explained the last answer was there's a play for multiple people to play together to make it success. There's an ecosystem that is required to make it together in success. So in your opinion, what are the top 3 things, or who are the ecosystem players? For a cloud service player is one, security is one, data is through, regulators are 4. How does all of them, where does a role of a system integrator? It started in the beginning. In 80s and 90s, we had a system integrators doing a big role. For a cloud implementation is a role for a system integrator. Or you learn it, do it. Everybody is just new to this game.
Well, I think that what we've really seen is that the systems integrator of the past has now been replaced by really an outstanding cloud architect. That one individual from a micro segmentation perspective can now piece together multiple parts that it used to take a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of scale to provide. So for me, I think it's really important that you manage your overall architecture and the piece parts that you put together to build your offering, because those capabilities and underlying functions are really what's ultimately going to allow you to build your feature set for your customer base.
Thank you, Barry. That was fascinating. That was fascinating. I learned a lot. So when I was talking to colleagues as to when you're going to hear Barry Carter, what would you like to hear? This is a question they polled in, and you answered 70% of CIOs' questions in India, what worries them. And mind you, this wouldn't have come except if I was speaking to a practitioner like you, is day in and day out experience things put together. Thank you so much. And dear audience, so what did you hear Barry Carter say? That please get your system architecture, network architecture before you get into the cloud policy right. That is important. Get your new cloud management services policy done correctly, because this can peak and trough sometimes. So you need to be prepared for all the good data, all the goodwill that you generated should not go haste. So keep your time and effort, keep on check. And the last, my link is your information security perimeter that's coming in. Please ensure you put adequate time and focus on that. So thank you so much, Barry. It was so useful conversation. Look forward to seeing you in India soon. And perhaps when your GCC in India, in Hyderabad, is, I presume they'll also contribute a lot to this vision and direction, what you're setting for yourself. Thank you so much.